By day, they wrangle gators in the murky backwaters of Louisiana, fearless, rugged, and revered. But behind the camera, the story is far darker. For years, Swamp People has captivated audiences with raw grit, family bonds, and high-stakes hunts deep in America's most dangerous wetlands. Millions tuned in to cheer on these modern-day frontiersmen, celebrating their triumphs, their legacy, their way of life. But off-screen, many of these reality TV icons weren't just wrangling reptiles, they were wrestling with demons of their own. From violent altercations and domestic scandals to fugitive arrests and wildlife crimes, the world behind Swamp People is not the feel-good narrative many fans imagined. The truth? Several of the show's stars have seen the inside of a jail cell more times than they've faced down a gator. And as court records piled up, fans were left asking, were these TV heroes misunderstood, or was the show hiding its own swamp of secrets? In this report, we're peeling back the curtain on the real lives of Swamp People's most talked about stars. What we found was shocking. And it all starts with a father-son duo once hailed as the pride of the swamp, until a violent incident changed everything. They were the heart of the bayou, a father and son team symbolizing strength, tradition, and family. But in 2023, their reputation took a violent, irreversible turn. R.J. Molinere and his son J. Paul weren't just stars on Swamp People, they were legends. Their bond was ironclad, their hunts explosive. R.J., a former wrestling champion with a deep Cajun lineage, brought muscle. J. Paul, a two-time Golden Gloves winner and undefeated MMA fighter, brought precision. Together, they were the unstoppable force fans adored. But off-camera, the picture was less polished. In August 2023, a chilling police report shattered their squeaky clean image. According to the Detroit Free Press, the two men allegedly followed a 24-year-old driver to a local mini-mart after a roadside argument. What happened next, according to that report, was brutal. R.J. reportedly struck the man with a beer bottle. The victim suffered a black eye, a swollen jaw, and a bruised forehead. Both R.J. and J. Paul turned themselves in. The charge? Aggravated battery. Their attorney claimed there was another side to the story. But for many fans, the damage was done. These weren't just hunters anymore. They were now defendants. And the consequences didn't stop there. In April 2024, J. Paul's mother, Stacy Molinere, launched a GoFundMe campaign, revealing that her son had been sentenced to 67 days in jail, not for the attack, but for contempt of court, tied to unpaid financial obligations. Despite being an active father who regularly paid what he could, the court saw things differently. His final words to his mother as he was cuffed in court were heartbreaking. "Make sure my babies are good, and please tell them I love them." For a show built on the image of tough but loving family men, this series of events was catastrophic. The History Channel began distancing itself from the Molineres, public opinion wavered, and a question began to form in the minds of longtime viewers. Had Swamp People unintentionally made icons out of men whose tempers were as dangerous as the predators they hunted? And R.J. and J. Paul were only the beginning. Because the next cast member had built a name on sheer size, brutal kills, and unmatched confidence. But off-screen, his secrets were even more predatory than his prey. When Roger Rivers joined Swamp People in Season 5, he was hailed as the perfect embodiment of Cajun grit. With deep roots in the Toledo Bend Reservoir, Rivers wasn't just hunting for sport, he claimed he was feeding a family of 5. Off camera, he painted himself as a humble man living off the land, not in it for fame or money. But that humble image was a smokescreen. In a series of charges that read more like a criminal playbook than a hunting log, Rivers was hit with multiple wildlife violations. The list was staggering. 6 counts of selling protected alligator snapping turtles, 3 counts of trafficking reptiles and amphibians without a license, 3 more counts of illegally harvesting gators, Add in selling deer meat, unlicensed fish sales, and possession of marijuana, and it became clear this wasn't just a woodsman trying to survive. It was a man running an underground game market. The real kicker? Rivers had long maintained he wasn't hunting for profit, but the receipts and the charges said otherwise. And it didn't end with animal trafficking. Soon after, Roger was back in court. This time, not for gators or turtles, but for allegedly scamming a homeowner out of $6,000. The charge? Residential contractor fraud. According to the complaint, he took payment for a job he never started. The result? Another mugshot, another bond, and another reason for the show's producers to quietly step back. Once admired for his beast-wrangling bravado, Rivers quickly became a ghost in the franchise. His screen time vanished, so did public appearances. He came into Swamp People as a larger-than-life character, but left with a rap sheet longer than a 14-foot alligator. And the pattern didn't stop there. Because if Roger Rivers lived a double life in the shadows, then the next cast member took his darkness home and left a trail of broken bones in his wake. Joe LaFont, better known to viewers as Trapper Joe, was an original cast member, a seasoned alligator hunter with a stern glare and a steady trigger finger. His stepson, Tommy Chauvin, affectionately dubbed Trigger Tommy, was his unpredictable sidekick. Together, they navigated the treacherous bayous of Louisiana with grit and humor. But underneath that rough and ready charm, a deeper issue was brewing. It started with tension. According to crew reports and on-camera squabbles, the two often clashed, sometimes refusing to hunt together at all. Still, fans chalked it up to family stress. Until things escalated in real life. In 2020, Tommy lost his gun rights following domestic battery charges. He left the show and disappeared from public view entirely. For a time, it seemed like the storm had passed. But Trapper Joe's troubles were just beginning. In Orange County, Florida, Joe was arrested following an altercation with his girlfriend. Reports stated he allegedly punched her and burned her skin with a lit cigarette during an argument. The victim chose not to press charges, a decision that drew widespread criticism. But the arrest was public, and the damage to Joe's image was irreversible. Then came 2015, and things got worse. According to police records, Joe was involved in another domestic violence incident, this time far more brutal. During an argument over text messages, Joe allegedly grabbed the purse off the victim's shoulder, pulled her to the ground, and fractured 2 of her ribs. She didn't seek medical help immediately, citing embarrassment and fear. But when the pain became unbearable, scans confirmed the worst. She contacted authorities, not to press charges, but simply to have the incident documented for future civil litigation. Joe was arrested again and held on a $3,500 bond. The charge? Domestic abuse. And it wasn't his first or his last. At least 3 arrests now stain Trapper Joe's record, each one involving intimate partner violence. While the History Channel remained silent, fans could no longer ignore the truth. The gators weren't the only ones in danger around Joe LaFont. And in a chilling twist of irony, the violence mirrored that of his stepson. They weren't just hunting partners, they were both predators in their own homes. But the swamp had more secrets, and the next came from a man whose time on the show was short, but whose criminal record stretched on long after the camera stopped rolling.
Viewers barely noticed him on screen, but when he vanished from Swamp People, it wasn't the producers calling cut, it was law enforcement. Nicholas Payne joined the Swamp People cast quietly, working as an apprentice under fan favorite Bruce Mitchell. He wasn't the loudest or the flashiest, but in the swamps, that kind of quiet often hides something far more dangerous. In Payne's case, it started with a seemingly minor offense. In 2010, he pleaded guilty to simple battery and resisting a police officer. He received 1 year of probation. Not ideal, but for some, forgivable. But then came June. Authorities in Okaloosa County arrested him for possession of drug paraphernalia. He posted bond and never returned. He failed to appear in court to enter his plea. That decision triggered a fugitive warrant, branding him as wanted across state lines. The story should have ended there, but it didn't. Payne resurfaced months later, not as a cast member, but as a headline. Police in New Orleans attempted to book him for a new disturbance and discovered his fugitive status during processing. According to reports, the situation began when police were called to Payne's residence for a domestic disturbance. His wife claimed he was locked out and causing a scene. Officers tried to intervene, but things spiraled. Nicholas allegedly struck an officer and fled on foot. He didn't make it far. He was captured by another officer nearby, arrested and booked on a fresh list of charges: disturbing the peace, battery of a police officer, resisting arrest, fugitive from another state. And yet, the History Channel remained quiet. When questioned, a spokesperson simply stated, "Nicholas has not been part of the show since filming concluded last season. We have no additional comment." But silence wasn't enough to erase what fans had now seen. Nicholas Payne had transitioned from anonymous swamp apprentice to a violent fugitive, all within a matter of years. And yet, his record still couldn't match the shocking fall from grace that came next, when one of Swamp People's biggest stars crossed a line no hunter ever should. He was the golden boy of Swamp People, charming, skilled, and born into Bayou royalty. But one night on the water, Chase Landry traded his rifle for recklessness, and it changed everything. Chase Landry wasn't just another hunter, he was swamp royalty. Son of the legendary Troy Landry, Chase was raised on gator hunts and southern grit. Fans loved him for his easy smile, confident stride, and quiet charisma. He had the presence of someone destined to lead the next generation of swamp survivalists. But in 2016, everything changed with the pull of a trigger. According to the Terrebonne Parish Sheriff's Office, Chase was out on the water in Bayou Chain hunting gators as usual. That's when he noticed a nearby boat speeding toward him. Feeling threatened, Chase made a snap decision and opened fire. A bullet tore through the oncoming boat, puncturing the hull and causing gasoline to leak. No one was injured, but the message was loud and clear. This wasn't part of the show. This was real life. And Chase Landry had just committed a felony. He was arrested shortly after, pulled over on a highway, and taken into custody. And when questioned, Chase admitted to firing the weapon. That confession alone was enough to trigger legal action. But then, he disappeared. Chase was scheduled to appear in court, the first step in facing the criminal charge of illegal discharge of a firearm. But when the day came, he never showed. The judge issued a warrant for his arrest, and just like that, one of the show's biggest stars became a wanted man. When pressed for answers, his lawyer made a bizarre claim. He might be out hunting. That excuse never confirmed. And while Chase avoided a public trial, he also faded quietly from television, staying out of the spotlight for years. It wasn't until recently that he began to resurface, spotted at fishing holes, community events, and posting cautiously on social media. Photos with his daughter, hunting photos, smiles. It was a softer image, maybe even a redemption arc. But for many, the damage was already done. Because Chase Landry didn't just shoot at a boat that night. He shattered the image fans had of a humble, principled Southern hunter. And once that illusion broke, it couldn't be pieced back together. By now, a pattern had emerged, one that raised troubling questions about the kind of men being elevated by the show. And behind the scenes, the producers were scrambling. As the controversies mounted, so did the pressure, and that's when the franchise began to shift.
As one scandal followed another, the spotlight that once celebrated the hunters of swamp people turned glaring and uncomfortable, and quietly, the show began to change. When Swamp People first aired in August 2010, it was a ratings juggernaut. Premiering to over 3 million viewers, it put the swamps of Louisiana and the people who lived in them on the entertainment map. It wasn't just about gator hunting. It was about family, tradition, and resilience. But as time wore on and cast controversies mounted, a shift occurred, not just in the narrative, but in the network's strategy. The show's airing schedule became increasingly erratic. Originally slotted on Sunday nights, it was moved to Thursdays, then Mondays, and eventually bounced around in an effort to retain viewers. By season 6, the producers brought in a new showrunner, and with that, many original cast members were let go or replaced. Officially, it was framed as creative direction, but for longtime fans, it was clear the show was cleaning house. At the time, the franchise was still pulling millions of viewers, but the tone had shifted. What was once a gritty, authentic portrayal of swamp life now seemed curated, almost sanitized. Meanwhile, the characters fans connected with most were either disappearing from the screen or reappearing in mugshots. The History Channel didn't openly address the controversies, but their programming choices spoke volumes. In 2018, they launched a short-lived spin-off, Swamp Mysteries with Troy Landry, positioning the original patriarch as a kind of wildlife consultant. It lasted just 6 episodes. Then came Swamp People's Serpent Invasion in 2020, shifting focus to invasive Burmese pythons in Florida. Again, familiar faces returned, but the energy was different, tamer, safer. The brand was evolving, maybe out of necessity. Because while Swamp People began as a celebration of Southern heritage, the off-camera arrests, scandals, and legal nightmares were threatening to turn it into something else entirely, a crime saga disguised as reality television. And yet, the franchise endured, albeit altered. The question now wasn't just about the hunters on the show, it was about the people behind the scenes. How much did the producers know, and how much were they willing to ignore for ratings? The swamp was still there, so were the gators, but the show that once prided itself on unfiltered authenticity had become something else entirely. And it left viewers wondering, if this is what we saw, what else had we missed? Next, we look at what this all means for the franchise, its fans, and the fading legacy of TV's wildest reality phenomenon. Once a symbol of tradition and resilience, Swamp People now serves as a cautionary tale, not just about its cast, but about what reality television chooses to celebrate. What began as a simple show about alligator hunters surviving in the Louisiana bayou has, over the years, evolved into something far more complicated. At its core, Swamp People was meant to honor family, culture, and the enduring fight to preserve a way of life. But somewhere along the line, that message got tangled in something darker. We watched as beloved figures, R.J. and J. Paul Molinere, Roger Rivers, Trapper Joe, Nicholas Payne, and Chase Landry were lifted up by fame, only to collapse under the weight of their own decisions. These were men who were supposed to embody strength and honor, but behind closed doors, many were battling legal troubles, violent tempers, and unresolved personal demons. And while the swamp never changed, the show had to. The franchise trimmed its cast, rebranded its tone, and quietly distanced itself from the most problematic figures. But even as Swamp People tried to move forward, the internet never forgot. Mugshots and court records now sit just a search away, adding a permanent shadow to a once celebrated cast. So what is the legacy of Swamp People? For some, it's still a love letter to Cajun culture and rural survivalism, a rare glimpse into a vanishing lifestyle.
But for others, it's a stark reminder that reality TV doesn't just capture drama. Sometimes it manufactures it, and sometimes it overlooks the warning signs. Because in the end, the swamp doesn't just conceal danger, it reflects it. And if Swamp People has taught us anything, it's this. You can wrestle a gator, outrun the law, or fool the cameras, but the truth always floats to the surface.
We've seen the mugshots, we've heard the charges, and we've watched as legends of the swamp unraveled before our eyes. But one question still echoes louder than a gator's roar. How much did we really know about these men? Were they misunderstood icons caught in the crosshairs of fame? Or did the spotlight simply reveal what had already been lurking beneath the surface? The truth is, Swamp People was never just a reality show. It was a mirror, one that reflected back the tension between myth and man, between the honor of tradition and the failures of those meant to uphold it. Fans are still divided. Some argue that off-camera behavior shouldn't stain on-screen legacies. Others say accountability shouldn't be a seasonal trend. So, what do you think? Was the downfall of Swamp People's stars inevitable, or did reality TV glorify the wrong heroes? Join the conversation below, because while the cameras may have stopped rolling, the swamp's secrets are far from silent. The water may settle, the trials may end, and the headlines may fade, but the swamp never forgets. What Swamp People gave us was more than gator hunts and shotgun blasts. It gave us stories, raw, unscripted, sometimes uncomfortable. It gave us characters we admired, and later, men we had to reconsider. It gave us drama we didn't always sign up for, the kind that couldn't be edited out in post-production. But in every scandal, there was a lesson about fame, about accountability, about how easily we crown heroes without knowing the full story. Some of these men are still out there, fishing, posting, rebuilding their lives. Others, gone from the public eye. But for the millions who watched, who followed, who believed, the question remains. Did we ever really know the people behind the swamp? The cameras rolled, the fans cheered, and the story, the real story, kept unfolding just off screen. Because in the end, the swamp isn't just a place. It's a symbol of what we hide, of what we chase, and of what always comes back up, no matter how deep we bury it. Still curious? Still questioning? The comments are open. And if you found this exposé revealing, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because more stories like this are waiting just beneath the surface.